Welcome to Real Estate 360 Live with Ryan Sloper, the trusted name in real estate radio. Now, here's Ryan Sloper.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Real Estate 360 Live. I am your host. For those of you not familiar with the program, my guest and I will cover everything under the sun in regards to real estate, from interest rates to the economy to what's happening in Washington, to the most recent government shutdown, to what the Fed's doing and how their policies affect interest rates, and what's driving mortgage rates up and down, what's driving housing prices up and down. We talk about the economics of things. We talk about most of the stuff that you're not going to hear on an ordinary real estate show. We really want to kind of break things down on a more elementary level, so that you have an idea of how things are going to be affected on a day-to-day basis when it comes to real estate, mortgage rates, and the like. If you'd like any questions that you have throughout this process when you're listening to our shows, you can always reach out to us on the website at reelestate360live.com. There's Ask a Question button on the right-hand side. For anybody that has questions in regards to, hey, I'm in the middle of a transaction and the government shut down, what's going to happen? We can answer all those questions. We'll probably address them on today's call. But just to let you know that is an outlet. We also have an 800 number. It's 877-245-2030. So joining me on our panel today to discuss the many issues of this past week, as he does every week, is Louis Camerasano. Louis is a former school teacher, former attorney, and a former general manager of a major real estate portal. He's often cited in the media as a real estate industry expert. He's been cited in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Fox Business, Smart Money, MSN, and numerous others. Louis, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing grand, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. So, obviously, the last time we talked, it was interesting because we had just got done discussing the Fed and the Fed's decision to not taper basically QE3, where they've been buying about $85 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities and treasuries. And I had mentioned that, that I thought that was probably exactly what they were going to do. They weren't going to change anything. We had the whole escapade and the talks of Syria, what we were going to do there, and that was kind of the sideshow that was taking place. And we had then said that, hey, you know what, the Fed's probably still not going to do anything because as we head into October, we had the threat of government shutdown, and now here we are. This week, we have the actual government shutdown. What are your thoughts in general about the shutdown, and what do you think? I mean, do you think that this is going to be something that they're going to resolve somewhat quickly in the next week or so, or do you think this is going to drag out throughout the month?
Well, Brian, let's first talk about what it means for the Fed. You and I have always anticipated what the Fed might come up with as an excuse not to do the tapering, and we suggested that the government shutdown might be the reason. And not just because the government is shut down and it creates economic uncertainty, but also because, if you remember, they preconditioned when they might taper and if they might taper in October on whether the data shows any improvement. And we knew that was ridiculous because the data wasn't going to show any improvement. Well, right. We're not going to know because the government is shut down and therefore those reports are not shown. So we don't have the data. So now it's very easy for the Fed to say, we don't have the data, and the government is shut down, so guess what? We got to wait a little longer before we taper again. So the song remains the same there, no taper. Now, as to the government shutdown, Ryan, this all can be avoided, and so can the debt ceiling. It's just that the entire Congress is dysfunctional. You've got dysfunctional monetary policy where they're kind of conditioned to think that the Fed's always there. They'll just print money, $85 billion a month, allows us to do deficit spending. Until that's not even enough, they come up against the debt ceiling. And then, of course, there's a faction in politics that says, we'll just raise it and carry on, as if there's, it's never going to end and we can always raise the debt ceiling. We've always raised the debt ceiling, and there's never been any consequences, and therefore there's not going to be any. Well, that's ridiculous because tomorrow comes and you have to pay the bills. So now we're up against kind of the same type of thing we had in 2011, Ryan, where both parties are pretending to dig in. They're not going to budge. And maybe they won't raise the debt ceiling this time, but I don't think they're going to have a default. Right. I mean, what's going to happen is they're going to realize, and Jack Lew is saying that, he's a U.S. Treasury Secretary, that the United States can't easily cherry pick what to pay because their systems don't operate that way. Now, you and I know that sure, the systems are complicated, but they've had months and months and months to think about how, if they had to, how they might be able to pay for essential services and how they might be able to pay the debt. Because the prospect of the United States defaulting, I think, would be the coup de grace in faith and confidence in the dollar. Because I mentioned earlier, we have dysfunctional fiscal policy where spending is out of control. You have dysfunctional monetary policy where for 5 years they're just printing money. And the only reason that the world or investors put up with that is because of the notion that the United States is a secure place to put your money.
Right.
Well, you can kind of ignore that they just print the money month after month, year after year in the trillions. You can ignore the fact that Congress never passed the budget, but you can't ignore not getting paid.
Right.
So the Treasury, the Congress, everyone needs to realize that they have to prioritize paying off the debt first. And there's enough money to do that. There's enough tax receipts to do that. Jackie Liu, I think, is bluffing and said, no, it's not that easy. The systems won't allow it.
Yeah.
Well, figure that out. Because the consequences of a default are catastrophic. And he even said that the other day. And the Treasury Department, Ryan, issued a report yesterday saying that if we defaulted, there'd be an economic crisis worse than 2008 and the dollar would collapse. Well, if that's what you're faced up against, you don't have an alternative. We'll just pass any budget and just raise the debt ceiling so we avoid that catastrophe. Well, there's a solution too. There's an alternative solution. Agree to figure out how to pay the debt so that doesn't happen.
Right.
So what they want to do is they use that as a scare tactic so that they get everything they want. Then they get Obamacare. Then they get to raise the debt ceiling, and everything goes on as before. So they're not looking for a solution. They're looking for a win.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it's pretty ridiculous because, many of the politicians and our representatives, they don't have a clue about how this is going to actually affect the confidence in the dollar or anything else. They're not worried about that at all. You know what I mean?
They don't care about that.
They don't care about it at all. It's just all about the politics of everything. And you and I have been saying, it's like, what is the tipping point? You know what I mean? And unfortunately, this country is so reliant upon entitlements and everything else at this point. We have so many people that I think that they just have to have confidence just to have confidence because, they need their, whatever it may be, whether it's food stamps or whatever other entitlements they're getting. They need those, and they're willing to turn a blind eye to a lot of this stuff. But now that actually people, it's interesting because, now that people aren't getting their paychecks, and what I feel is going to happen is the same thing that happened back in '96, Lewis, is when they do come up with a budget, everybody will go back to work. Probably everybody will get their back pay for time missed, right? But what's ridiculous is that, once again, this economy is already very anemic, and to slow things up, you're slowing things up and stalling out all types of businesses right now. So people aren't getting paychecks, so basically they're not spending money, and they can't spend money and going into restaurants and everything. So it's putting everybody back behind the eight ball. So by the time everybody goes back to work, imagine the numbers that we're seeing now, Lewis, what they'll be in another 2 months, 3 months.
Right, you're looking at another when is the next recovery, because this recovery is over. It was already on the way out, and if this lasts a few more days, you've basically killed all the momentum in the real estate market, any momentum in the economy, and now you're back to square one. And that gives the Fed an excuse, we're going to need to do more QE because we had this government shutdown that really harmed things. The economy was on the right track, but then that happened. So guess what we have to do now? More QE.
Yeah, and remember what I had talked about before. It won't be QE4. They'll come up with some other name, some other program. And why it's necessary to keep us from the brink of collapsing, essentially. And it's just the same old song and dance. I mean, it's so unfortunate that we keep having to deal with this, and it's almost like, Lewis, I think we've gotten so used to this, we pretty much know what's going to happen, right? It's like, okay, well, we're going to go from Syria, then we're going to go to government shutdown, then we're going to go to debt ceiling. I mean, there's always going to be something, right?
We are distracting a population that has a limited time span and is economically illiterate. So
right.
of course, they have no idea. The average person has no idea what QE is. There was a Reuters poll on that. Like 1 in 5 even knew what it was. And I'm sure of the 20% that know what it is, have no idea how it works. Very few know
right.
how it works. Most people in this country have no understanding how wealth is created, how jobs are created, where money comes from, what value means. So they are easily swayed by anybody who gets up there and says, it's the Democrats' fault, it's the Republicans' fault. If we only had this. And that's the extent of what they say, and then they fall behind one slogan that really doesn't mean much, and they're comfortable with that position, and they'll dig their heels in, and they'll insist, you got to raise the debt ceiling, the Republicans are hostage takers.
Yeah.
And that's the extent of their knowledge.
Right. And what's been going on here, I've been discussing this with clients and friends and family members lately, and everybody's like, I don't understand. When you're looking at any basic business, if you had a big business, and Louis, I hired you, and I said, hey, Louis, you and 10 other of you in this room are responsible for coming up with a budget by October 1st or whatever that deadline is, and I expect that to be on my desk, and everybody has to agree upon something, come up with some sort of compromise, and it's not done, and it's not on my desk by that day. What happens to you?
Well,
what happens to
I
you
might get fired, but the person who's in charge of that project gets fired.
Exactly.
And that would be the Speaker of the House, and that would be the head of the Senate. Reid and Boehner, that's their job to figure that out.
And the fact that there isn't
and they don't even do a budget.
Right. They don't even
Not that it's not an unacceptable one. They don't even do one.
Well, the fact that there's not even any accountability, like if they don't do something, there are no repercussions, right?
Oh, they still have their better health care than Obamacare, and they still get paid.
They still get their paycheck. They still have their health care because they are, they're basically working. We're the one that puts them in office, right? So they somehow get anointed this special, treatment, and it doesn't. And that's why I think that they can let things drag on like this. I mean, I can't remember which representative they asked, what he planned on doing with his paycheck, and he was asked this months ago before the shutdown ever happened, and he said, well, I haven't even thought about that. Give me a break. You hadn't thought about it because there's nothing that's going to affect your pay, right?
He doesn't have to think about it.
You don't have to think about it. Then he was asked again, and he says, I'm going to donate it to charity. Yeah, that's a great answer. You couldn't think about that the first time, right? And it's just, I don't understand until the United States decides that they want to treat everything like a real business, like a normal average American would have to do. And yeah, you can't, when a normal American maxes out a credit card and then tries to go and take out another one, what are the odds of them getting another credit card? They're not going to get one. But
you do have to blame and I don't even think it's blame, Ryan. The reason the rest of the world and private investors, large companies, sovereigns buy the United States debt is basically because the United States is the dominant military and economic power.
Correct.
So the United States gets a pass, and like in Rome, for decades, centuries, you can get away with bad behavior if you run the show. You don't have to run a fiscally tight ship. You already own the world. But eventually, that's not the way to stay on top. It's just like, the Rocky movies. Right. You get there by training. Yeah, you can kind of coast for a while as the champ, but eventually someone's going to knock you out if you don't stay in shape and you don't you don't keep the same productive capacity, the same work ethic that got you there. What happens, if you just look at it, is over time, over the last 30, 40 years, the United States has been coasting on the post-World War II, 1950s economic engine that we had, and then we just created what we did in the last 30 or 40 years is we created the infrastructure, not how to do better, but how to distribute all that wealth that's been created with the Great Society, and then increasing, now that we've got a great military, we won World War II, we've got to show everybody we got it. So you drop a bomb on Hiroshima, you go into Korea, you go into Vietnam, you go into Iraq. And so basically everything that got you there, you just put on display. You put your wealth on display by handing out welfare, by increasing Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and then you put your military on display. But we haven't really done much to back the support of those products. In other words, there's not the productivity behind it There is just basically the might and the bluster behind it, and therefore we're able to spend money that we don't have because the rest of the world will lend us money because of the position we're in. So we earned that position, but we squandered it.
Well, no, and then we have our wonderful statistics that we talk about every week, and these economic reports, which can be skewed to however they really see fit. I mean, as we talk about the employment numbers, the jobless claims, all those things, and the, people that they don't count because they're no longer actively looking for work or they're part-time workers. I mean,
and who edits that stuff? I mean, who audits that stuff? The Fed isn't audited. The Fed can and do what it wants. And the U.S. government statistics can be whatever they say they are. They can even be transparent about making changes to the consumer price index, the producer price index, by using hedonics. And so, they substitute beef for chicken, and then it goes to soy burgers, and they say the price hasn't risen because you can still buy a burger for 82 cents. That's the kind of stuff that you get away with when you have a monopoly of economic military power.
Yeah,
who's going to count? What? There's going to be an alternative Bureau of Labor Statistics? Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. And if there was one created, no one would pay attention to it.
Yeah, and you do have that guy. What was he have? Shadow Stats.
Yeah, and that guy's how often do we hear about
markets,
that?
Yeah, the markets don't pay attention to that.
Well,
the markets pay.
I mean, the mainstream media is not going to cover that, right? They're not pushing that out there, and it's like we talked about, with Ron Paul and a lot of the information that he brings. How far has he gotten buried right now? You know what I mean? So
they've actually, you do see him on TV every now and then, and he does get his point across. But when he was running for president, they weren't letting his point get across. That's for sure.
Well, I think he's created his own internet TV channel now.
Yeah, Ron Paul channel, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, he's trying to stay relevant, but it's very difficult to hit the masses when you're not being put on Fox News or.
Well, also he's charging, which is going to make it difficult to reach the masses because he's only going to be preaching to people who are willing to pay, and the people that are willing to pay are already on his side.
Exactly.
So that TV show is kind of a fan club for Ron Paul. In order for any type of message to get out and resonate with the masses, it really has to be free.
Yep.
I just don't see how you can put information out there and charge for it because you're only going to attract people who are interested in it.
Yeah. So let's jump over now. Okay. So we have the government shutdown, right? And basically now the government is deemed, they're basically only going to keep essential personnel working. Non-essential basically has been furloughed. Who determined that? I'm not really sure. You and I kind of talked briefly before the show started today that it's kind of interesting how they determine that type of stuff. So how this relates to real estate, and everybody thinks that, okay, well, that's just government workers. That's not going to affect, my ability to purchase a home. It's not going to affect anything. Well, what we've actually seen interest rate-wise is interest rates have actually been getting better during this whole government shutdown period because there's instability. Anytime there's any instability, people pull their money out of stocks and they put them into bonds or mortgage-backed securities, which are considered more safe. So we have gotten a little bit better interest rates over this period of time, but that's great that we've gotten better interest rates. But at this point in time, you couldn't even probably close on a mortgage if you wanted to because USDA, which is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which offers a rural development loan, they are on furlough. They're not basically going to be issuing any conditional loan approvals. Social Security Administration is shut down for any verification of that. IRS is shut down as far as they're not completely shut down, but they're shut down in the department that basically confirms the tax return. So when somebody goes to apply for a loan, they fill out what's called a 4506P, which is a request for a tax transcript from the IRS. Well, I would say not 100%, but probably 90% of all lenders and banks are going to require this form to be filled out in order for them to verify the tax returns that you're giving them as to what the IRS actually has on file that's been, completed. And so to make sure that those match up, to make sure there's no fraud going on. Well, most lenders have all gotten a note from their corporate office that has said, without a 4506 in the file, it cannot close, okay? So if it can't close, and now, we already have a pretty, slow real estate market at this point, I can imagine that this is only going to slow things up further. It could be weeks, it could be months, who knows? Because by the time these people actually get back to work, there's going to be a backlog.
Mm-hmm.
it's traditionally already slow to begin with. I can only imagine what's going to happen when everybody comes back. They're going to act like it's a big old frenzy, and this could be months, literally months delay. Now, our economy was already slow. The housing market was actually slowing up a lot just with the interest rate hikes that we've had over the last 2 or 3 months. So, and Louis, you and I had talked that we wanted to kind of see where the data went towards the end of this year as far as home sales and the inventory levels and all that. This is going to throw another monkey wrench in there, and it's going to give, as you would say, probably the Fed and everybody else another reason to stall things out, or maybe do QE4 or whatever name they come up with, because they're going to say, well, that was during the government shutdown, so we really can't count that. Now, once everybody's back to work, you know what I mean? Just think about it.
The excuses are endless, and we can come up with them for them, but I'm sure they already have more than we can even think of.
Oh, yeah, and they have to. I mean, because to keep this train rolling, to keep it going, they've got to have as many excuses they can possibly come up with, or a different report, or a different way to look at something, or have Bullard saying something on one side of the country and Bernanke saying something completely different on the other.
I did a blog post on that. I took the 7 or 8 Fed president's comments the day, in the days following the Federal Reserve Open Committee meeting after Bernanke announced no taper, and the day after, I think 4 or 5 of them were already out of the country talking at conferences. And, of course, they were talking about how they might taper in October if the data suggested it. So they conditioned us that everything is data-dependent,
right,
knowing that there wasn't going to be any data.
Right. There is no such thing as common sense, right? Like that you just kind of look at things for what they are and just say, hey, the economy sucks right now, right? Unemployment is terrible. Guess what, guys? We might be having to print more money. Okay.
We're going to look at the data, Ryan. We think, and in fact, they don't even say they're going to look at the data. They try to give the impression that the data is going to show something good next month. Not just that the economy's okay. It's like it's improving, and we're just going to wait another month to see it. Oh, sorry, we couldn't see it. It didn't come out. Hey, Ryan, the other one that they can use is, we talked about this one too, and they haven't mentioned this one yet, is Obamacare.
Yep.
Not just the strain on the employers, which they claim doesn't exist, and it's already started because the rollout of that has been less than stellar.
Yep.
And you had Obama talking about how it's like Apple computers, and there's a glitch, and somehow, it's because there's this great demand. Well, problems with Obamacare can also impact the economy. People are not having their health insurance. The exchanges are costing more than they expected. They're going to have to redo everything. Obamacare is essentially another large program at another large expense that really probably hasn't been properly factored into the budget. I know that supposedly they took some of the money from Medicare and moved it into Obamacare. Well, that money is going to have to find its way back to Medicare, and Obamacare is going to, you can bet, is going to run over in 2014 of what its original budget is. Well, the United States is going to have another budget problem.
Exactly. What are the odds that Obamacare is a sustainable answer? You know what I mean? There's only probably 2 countries in the world that have ever gone this type of route and actually been successful in doing it. And to be quite honest with you, I've talked with numerous business owners right now, and they've all said, or people that are just on individual employment plans, they've all doubled. Their cost is all doubled, right? All just right off the bat. So from $500 it's now $1,000.
Ryan, do you remember back in when the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, they and people called it Obamacare. Yep. That was some kind of code that you were some kind of right-wing nut that was trying to characterize this and mock it as Obamacare. Well, Obama now calls it Obamacare. Everybody calls it Obamacare because if you favor Obamacare, the last thing you want to be quoted as saying that you're in favor of the Affordable Health Care Act when it's not affordable. So you're better off saying it's Obamacare because at least he has some political currency or people like him.
That's very true. It's anything but affordable, and all I keep hearing is that when you are able to get on the website and you are able to actually check the rates, that they're going to be lower. Well, I can't wait to see what the comparison is. And then supposedly what's to come is that, once the website is up and running, you're able to get rates that these other insurance companies, private insurance companies, are actually going to mirror the coverage of this government plan so that they don't lose their current clients. Well, how long do you think it's going to take before all this gets implemented? This isn't. I mean, how many pages is it? 13,000 for them to get through?
That's ridiculous. I mean, well, they didn't. And Pelosi admitted they didn't read it. She said, we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. And then I'm sure once it was passed, it's not like she sat down and read it anyway.
Right.
And people, that's the problem. People defend things. You see it on message boards. People defending Obamacare or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be any particular issue, but they really don't know anything about it. They just know the political talking points, and that if you disagree with them, you're an evil person or something wrong with you.
Well, not just
and that's really, how can people have such deeply held beliefs on such shallow amount of knowledge?
I know. Well, and with the age of the internet and social media, you see it, it's rampant. You know what I mean? Like, you can go on Facebook, and sometimes I see the posts, and I'm like, did they even bother to look up anything before they put that post down? You know what I mean? Like, you can't just offend somebody just because you like them. You know what I mean?
You can if they're a family member or a friend.
Correct. But, when you're talking in general, just about, like, the economy or the job situation and all that stuff, for the most part, nobody's really right at this point. They all don't know what they're doing. It's very evident they don't know what they're doing. They can't set a budget. They can't cut their expenses. They can't do basic things that businesses have to do. And
well, you're right, but Ryan, the people who defend them, they're the worst. People who get on either side, and the Democrats saying the Republicans are wrong, and the Republicans saying the Democrats are wrong. The right answer is they're both wrong.
They're both wrong. Yep.
You cannot defend the actions of one or the other, or one over the other. Because it really is the lesser of two evils, because none of them are presenting plans that make sense, even to their own ideologies.
Oh, yeah. And what happens is many people, they hop on board with one person or another, or one side or the other, because of one or two issues that they believe firmly in.
Right.
And then everything else that person says or does, or that side does, has to be right just because. You know what I mean? And so they become, it's almost like brainwashed into thinking that, everything that's said and done from that point on has to be correct. I don't know. It just bothers me because, we hire basically we elect these people to do what they supposedly say they're going to do in the beginning. They never end up doing any of it.
And some they do opposite.
They do opposite.
And they still get reelected.
But here's the thing, the next election comes along, and you would think that something would change, and then they end up being in office again the next time.
Well, here's a quick question for you, Ryan. Do you know of any politician that ran to pass the Internet Surveillance Acts, the CISPA, to tax the Internet, to spy on you, to go to war in Syria? No one ran on that, but somehow they get into Congress, and that's what they decide they're going to do.
Right.
And then the worst part about it is they come back for re-election, having voted for these things 2 years later or a year later, and people vote him in again.
Yeah, and, it just amazes me. It's because it's like, it's deja vu all the time. I feel like we're just talking, you know what I mean? We're running.
Well, the reason they get reelected, Ryan, is not because most people don't vote in the congressional elections unless it happens to coincide with a presidential election. And even then, only half the people vote. And so basically, whoever's politically organized and has the funding will get elected. If you think about it, your congressman, probably 15% of the population in your area voted for that person, even if they won 60%.
Right.
Most people, if they half the people didn't vote, so that cuts their numbers in half. And then the other half that did vote, only half voted for that person.
Right.
So you really don't get that person doesn't have any mandate. And even the people that voted for that person, many of them probably didn't even know what that person is, other than he was a Democrat or a Republican.
Right, and then so the one time that people do show up is mainly just for presidential elections, and that's it. And then,
what do they know about the presidential policies? And even if they know anything about them, they're going to do a different thing anyway when they get in.
Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting because, I thought to myself, I was like, okay, well, I'm in the real estate business and in the mortgage business right now. What could I have done? What business could I have been in at this point in time that this government shutdown wouldn't affect me? And I really couldn't come up with one, to be honest with you, because they're all intertwined. Unfortunately, with government regulation that we have, all businesses are somewhat dependent upon the government being open for business. Right?
And that's a shame because it's really a weak point in the system that if the government shuts down, a lot of things shut down.
Yeah,
it can be that way.
Well, the free market, this is not really a free market, right?
You can't shut down the free market.
Yeah, you can't shut it down. And the fact that it is shut down, right now is
exactly
telling me that, this is not what our founding fathers had in mind. I can tell you that.
Well, housing, the government was never supposed to be involved in housing, and the government is basically involved in 90% of housing and 100% of school financing, and then the government's involved in education right up to, other than those people that are homeschooling.
Yeah, and how much anger and frustration is being built up right now. The parks are closed down. Like you said, they put basically like a tarp over the Washington Monument. Now people that were applying for mortgage, they can't close on time. I mean, I can just see it. These people that are being furloughed, well, if they were already in process to get a loan and they were being furloughed, I guarantee that they're going to have to go back through the underwriting process and might get denied the loan.
There's 800,000 government workers, I believe, that are furloughed.
And
they're like everybody else. Some of them are in the process of buying homes.
Right, and that's just in that federal sector, too. That's not counting a ton of the other contractors and everybody else that's out there. You know what I mean?
Right, that are working for, yes.
Correct. So there's a lot more people. And, I mean, when you think about it, a lot of these are people that are right in my general vicinity in the D.C. metro area. And I hear a lot of them talking. I obviously read a lot of the Facebook posts. And now while I think that, as we spoke earlier, Louis, they're not going to default, okay? They know better than to do that. I guarantee you Bernanke and the Treasury Secretary and everybody is saying the same thing. You cannot default because basically that would completely crush the value of the dollar.
But they will use that to get whatever the threat of default, to get whatever they want to get added back into the continuing resolution.
Yes. Yeah, they'll leverage it as much as possible, right? It's continue scare tactics, and I mean, it's sad.
But eventually they will default. We will default because right now there's enough money in taxes to pay the interest as it comes due. But at some point, as interest rates rise and we continue to spend beyond our means, there won't be enough even to pay the interest.
which is why I continue to believe that the Fed will continue their programs for the foreseeable future. You know what I mean? I don't see a way around it because I feel like the minute that we start, and now obviously they could, I don't know, I just think that Wall Street's their moves are so in lockstep with what the Fed does and says that they can continue to do this for at least a couple more years and continue to come up with more distractions to where people can turn a blind eye, which would at least get us through the end of Obama's term.
I think there is enough time for that. But at that point, there'll be so much debt and 7 years of QE.
It sounds crazy, right, Louis? But
this is not even Keynesian. Keynesian economics teaches that when you have these troughs in the economy, when you have recessions, that you do some type of stimulus to get the economy moving because the regular free market economy isn't spending. But once it levels out, you go to a surplus, you don't do it anymore. What they've done here is an abomination where not only have they done the spending, it hasn't even done any good.
Right.
So they do more of it, which just makes it worse because in Keynesian economics, it presupposes that there might be surpluses. Well, we've gotten rid of that idea. There's never going to be a surplus now.
No.
There's such a deficit that... And then, of course, you get the popular media and politicians talking about why deficits don't matter, and you get Krugman-type economics saying, oh, we can borrow even more. The cheaper money is, the more we spend, and the wealthier it will become. Why wouldn't you take advantage of low interest rates that you manipulated by paying for them by printing money out of thin air? And that's the logic. And if you could follow that, you would be bankrupt, but you'd find out that Mercedes were on sale, so you go buy more of them.
Right.
And they say, well, it's different. Governments are different than economics, supply and demand, budgets, balance, profit, loss, all apply to whoever's running money through an account. Whether you're an individual, a company, or a government. It isn't.
Except politicians don't recognize any of those words that you just
Because
said.
they've never been an individual or they've never worked at a company,
No.
and they're just politicians, and all they see is we can print money and buy stuff, and I can get reelected if I promise it.
Yeah, and if keep in mind that if inflation did set in, Lewis, they would go and vote themselves a raise high enough to cover that, right?
Oh, of course.
So,
well, actually, I think there's an amendment in the Constitution now. They're not allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah, well,
I think that wasn't the most recent amendment passed. I don't know, maybe during the Clinton years, where no price they can't vote themselves a raise at any point where they're going to be in office.
Yeah, but you also remember that they said that they weren't going to be allowed to do basically insider trading anymore, and now that's back on the table. They're allowed to do it again.
Yeah, but that was never in a constitutional amendment. Well, they can still pass. Well, the point is what they can do. They're not dumb. They could they can pass the pay raise, get unelected, and then come back the next term, and they could take advantage of the pay increase. But they're not in it for the pay increase, really. They're there because of the money they make from taking. I want to call them bribes, but they're there. Actually, I don't think they take bribes. Well, some of them do, but they don't take bribes while they're in office. But it's the connections that they make. So once they're out of office, then they
come back. Yeah, they come back
as lobbyists.
Yep, exactly. I mean, and
they're not there for the 180 whatever they make. 180. Not that that's not a good salary, but that's not what they're there for.
Right. They're just extensions of big business. That's all it is.
Or special interest lobby groups.
Yeah, and to be honest, like, do you think a lot of these big businesses are really sweating things right now? Probably not, because they'll turn around and create some sort of loophole for them for that year, give them some sort of exception to the rule. It's what always happens, and unfortunately, the majority of the population, the middle class, upper middle class, which is upper middle's now moving to middle's moving to lower middle. I mean, it's
lower middle's moving to poverty, right?
Exactly. That's what's taking place here. The wealth being transferred, even more money's going to the ultra rich. And that's going to continue to happen here.
And it's not because, and you see, this is what really galls me. It's not because the ultra rich are somehow more productive nowadays, and therefore they're entitled to this money. They've rigged the system to have the money flow their way. Yep. I am not opposed to somebody making more money than me that works harder, even if he gets lucky, as long as he's not receiving free government money, or he's not the beneficiary of a tax break, a subsidy, low interest rates, access to credit that everybody else doesn't have.
Right.
Because when Obama talks about everyone's got to play by the same rules, I agree with that. But that's not what we have created.
No.
If everyone's playing by the same rules, then there are no cylinders.
Yep.
There are no government subsidies. There is no QE. There is no bailout. Everybody rises and falls on their own. And then at some point, you can argue, if you're a true progressive, that there will be people who in that mix don't make it. And therefore, there's got to be some type of safety net, and that taxes will pay for that. But that's not what you have now. You have welfare at the top and at the bottom of the economic scheme. We have welfare for the very wealthy with tax breaks and QE and subsidies and so on. And then you have welfare for just about everybody else who's not in the middle class.
Right.
Food stamps and Obama phones and so on. So who pays for it? Well, the wealthy don't pay for it. They're just too busy getting all the benefits, and then they have tax loopholes, so they don't pay much in taxes.
Yep.
And then what they say is they want to tax millionaires and billionaires, and a family of a cop and a fireman, or who make $200,000. Now they have to. Well, the only thing I don't. It makes no sense that somehow we even think about using our taxes to pay for the benefits we get, because the taxes don't even come near covering it anyway.
Yeah,
but the point is, they still extract them from the middle class.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and this has been going on for years, and it'll continue to go on.
Well, it goes on in a direction, though, where the poor get poorer, the rich get richer, and the middle class loses less and less of their purchasing power.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've seen that firsthand. I mean, it's and in the D.C. metro area too. I mean, really, if you're upper middle or versus middle or lower middle, there's a big difference there.
But now, what's the case now, though, Ryan? It's always two wage earners too. You could have been middle or upper middle class 30, 40 years ago with one wage earner.
Right.
There's no way you can do that today.
No, not at all. So back to real estate and what all of this and the implications that it's going to have on the overall real estate market. I mean, this could actually put downward pressure on prices in the short term. In the long term, depending upon what the outcome of this is, I mean, it could still put downward pressure on prices because the ability of people not to be able to get loans as quick as they were, people that maybe were furloughed or are going to be permanently furloughed, who really knows? I know that a lot of lenders actually look at it when they're calculating income. They actually make them put on a verification of employment, are they expected to be furloughed any days this year? And if the employer marks anywhere on there, they're going to pretty much cut that income probably somewhat in half. You know what I mean? So
let me ask you a question, Ryan. If you're an employer and you're uncertain because the government employers are not really sure what's going to happen, do they put down and do they have any responsibility or liability if they put yes because they think there might be? Is it their opinion, or is it have to be based on some communication that they receive that there will be a furlough this year for that employee?
Well, I can't really speak on behalf of the operation, the HR department that's, sending these things out, you know what I mean? But I would imagine if, let's say that the person had already been furloughed one time this year, that they're going to probably answer the question on the side of they could be furloughed again. You know what I mean? They're not going to definitively say. So now if they haven't been furloughed yet, I think that there's a chance for them to say, hey, yes, based upon where they're at now, they probably won't be furloughed. You know what I mean? But now that the shutdown has happened, I think that those answers could change. And once again, that's what we haven't seen. That's what we haven't seen yet. And it'll be interesting to see the way that those things get interesting, because that just changes buying power. Once again, that changes people's ability to qualify for certain amounts. All these things are not good for real estate. Definitely not. And while it could be temporary, it's the hiccup that we didn't need at this point in time. You know what I mean? It's just something else.
Hiccups in real estate are not like hiccups in the stock market. You can recover very quickly. You can see the next day after a stock market crash, things can recover. Real estate, as you know, it's a long, drawn-out process, and a lot of it is based on momentum. When people are getting into the market, they feel like it's a good time to buy. When you have this uncertainty, and it's in the fall, and rates are rising, and maybe you're on the border of whether you can afford it, you just lose interest. You say, you know what, let's see what happens.
Yeah,
and when you have wait and see, you have no activity.
Yep, prime example. I have a client that owns a primary house now. She was thinking about buying a second home. She's been thinking about it for a long time. Her and I have had numerous discussions about interest rates and if she was going to do it and she can afford it and, she can rent it out, have some money come in on it as well and live there, so many months out of the year. Well, she's tied into the government as well, and she had basically committed she wanted to move forward on this second home. And then as soon as the talks of this shutdown basically started, she's completely backed off. Now she's completely against that idea because she has no faith in the system at all. You know what I mean? And when people have that fear, it paralyzes them and it makes them become more conservative, which they should be because they're unsure about their future. But at the end of the day, that's another real estate transaction that won't ever happen.
Well, Ryan, given that, I wanted to ask you about gold and silver.
Yeah.
I would think normally, if you have this fear, and in 2011, gold and silver went ballistic during the time period where the government was shutting down. If you have this fear that the United States, which is the premier currency in the world, might not pay its bills, you have the Treasury Secretary saying the dollar could collapse if we don't pay our bills. Why is there not a rush into hard assets? You could say like real estate, but it's hard to buy real estate when the government shuts down. But it's not hard to buy with a click of a mouse click, gold and silver.
I've thought about
we
this
haven't
a lot.
seen, at least in the last 3 days,
No.
Since the government's been shut down, any rush to the safety. In fact, if anything, they're still buying U.S. treasuries, which is really the cause of the problem.
They're
the ones that might not get paid.
To be honest, Louis, I'm not really sure what the answer is. I don't want to say, but I feel like there is some manipulation of gold and silver going on as well. Because if Wall Street started basically buying it up, in the mass quantities, a lot of it, and we're really driving the price up really fast, that's really going to, that's going to scare people a lot more, right? I mean, it's going to be like, oh, wow, look, where foreign countries are going to say, oh, look at gold and silver. It looks like the United States is about to collapse. I think those are all the conversations that we'd have. And I don't know. You know what I mean? And I
guess it's seen as an alternative currency, and if it shows strength, then it shows dollar weakness. I mean, the dollar actually, I was looking at it the other day, the dollar index. In fact, the dollar index since 2009 has really, it's fluctuated, but the dollar's withheld its purchasing power pretty well. I mean, against the other, it's actually up today, against the other currencies.
Well, I mean, should gold and silver probably be double where they're at right now, considering, like where our dollar is and where our economy is? I mean, I think it should be, but it's not. And and you know what I mean? We actually had to spike up, and then it came way back down, and now we have so much instability right now. I mean, what really does the dollar have going for it? There's nothing. There's nothing to hang your hat on, and I personally can see that it makes complete sense to buy gold and silver right now. But the fact that it's not happening, the fact that we're not seeing huge moves here with all this going on, Wall Street's kind of just following that pattern of I guess going along and doing what Congress and the Fed wants us to do. And
they know the bread is buttered. I mean, you made big gains in Wall Street in the last 3 or 4 years in the stock market. But it does highlight also that there is a difference between the paper market and the physical gold and silver markets, because in China and India, and even at the U.S. Mint, the sales of gold and silver, where people take delivery or send it to a vault, that's actually way up. The demand for the physical is way up. And I think when you're talking about manipulation, it's possible that there's naked short selling where people sell paper contracts in excess of not only what they might have or might even be deliverable. And in some instances, there's been trades where the amounts traded in a single instance, one trade, are half the total silver or half the total mining of gold in a year. Right. No one has that kind of gold or silver to sell, and if they did, they wouldn't sell it in 1 minute. If you want to get the best price, you don't say, oh, I've got 4 tons of gold, I better go dump it on the COMEX now. Yep. Because the only reason you would do that is to drive the price down.
Yeah. Well, that the other reason is that most people don't know much about what to invest in, right? They're watching the stock market. The stock market's up, still up. I mean, even though it's down, it's way up above where they should be. They're not necessarily looking at gold and silver as a smart play because they don't understand, overall what's going on here. Many people are scared and have no idea of where we're headed. I mean, you and I don't know where we're headed because we don't know what the Fed's going to do, right? We don't know what their moves are. We're just always trying to guess.
We're paying attention, and we're as clueless as everyone else.
I know. I mean, it's comical that but honestly, we've guessed right a bunch of times because it seems like we're starting to catch on at specifically what's going to happen. They create distractions, then they don't have to answer questions. They can push things out. We know Bernanke is basically done. Nothing's going to happen on his dime through the end of this year. Obama, the chance of something really bad, some sort of economic changes on his dime, that's probably not going to happen. You know what I mean?
Well, think about with Obama. He'll look like he'll come out smelling like roses. He comes into office blaming Bush and the Republicans for the economic crisis. Right. He muddles through with no crisis. He leaves as a crisis. Look at these. Hopefully a Republican gets in for his point, so he can say he cleaned it up, and now he'll be out there just like Clinton is, as a private citizen, flying around complaining about how the Republicans wrecked the economy that he created and ruined Obamacare.
Right. Are we going to classify last 10 years as the lost years or something? Because I mean it's just much of the same. I mean, if anything, it's
the low interest rate policy since 2001.
It could be called the decade of the Fed, right? Or something to that extent, because I mean they pretty much control our entire country. I mean, it's completely, everything is dictated on Wall Street and basically all filtered all the way down to the average American. by the Fed at this point. And
it accelerated. If you think about it, it accelerated. In 2001, the big deal was Greenspan just reduced the Fed's fund rate by a point.
Right.
For starters. Okay. He didn't print $85 billion a month. He didn't send trillions of dollars overseas. And he did do the bailout of long-term capital management, which was kind of a precursor to all this. But with the amount of Fed intervention and the dollars involved has gone exponentially up every year since 2001. So Greenspan was criticized for low interest rates. Bernanke can be criticized for no interest rates.
Right.
And Yellen is a proponent of negative interest rates. So let's see how she pulls that off.
Well, don't think that it can't happen, right? I mean, anything is possible at this point. I mean,
well, they charge you to put money in the bank. That'd be it. And if the bank gets in trouble, they say, well, you know what? You gave us $100, but we can give you $80 back, okay? Come back tomorrow to the ATM and you can take $5 out. And you do that for a few days and you'll get some of your money back.
Well, wouldn't that cause basically a run on the banks then? I mean, everybody would probably lose all credibility with the banking.
Well, wait. Cyprus got through it. Cyprus still exists. They have a banking system.
Yeah.
People just get used to, you put your money in the bank, they're doing you a favor for loaning them money, and if you get some of it back, count yourself lucky.
Yeah, well, and they could probably...
That's kind of how they're trying to condition it.
Right. Yeah.
The banks are so important to our existence. That was the concept of the bailouts, that there would be a systemic collapse, not just of the economy, but of human existence if this happened. And that was the concept of too big to fail.
Yep.
And the too big to fail entities weren't the farmer who was sending food to you or the electric company or the water company. It was the bank. And they could not go out of business. So if once you accept that premise, you have $1,000 in the bank, and to avoid the destruction of the human race, you had to take $800 back. Okay,
right.
I did my part. At least now we're still alive because I'm $200 poor, but at least I'm not dead.
Well, I think
that's kind of how they frame the whole thing.
I guess people are so used to losing money at this point anyway. I guess they would just accept it. You know what I mean? It's par for the course at this point.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out here over the next week or so. Do you think that we'll have this shutdown resolved by the end of next week, or are you thinking it's something that could drag out to the end of the month?
Oh, I think they'll go right up to the 17th.
Right.
There will be a big Wall Street day the day after. They'll avoid the default. They'll cut something. There'll be some grumbling. Obamacare will sail through. There won't be any stopping of that. And there'll be some type of agreement to keep. They'll cherry pick, even though Jack Lew says it's impossible to cherry pick. It's not. The things that they can cherry pick that are on automatic payment, they were going to shut Social Security down anyway.
Right.
All they'll have to do is furlough half the workers at the Department of Agriculture. They'll just do more furloughs.
Yep.
Now that they can do. That's not an automatic pilot. That's not hard to do.
Right.
You just stop. Yeah. It's harder to stop Medicaid and Social Security payments and the military, but it's not hard to cut off because they have the systems to do it. You can, when they fire an employee, rarely, but when they do in the federal government, they stop paying them. They have the systems to do that. So they'll just lay off people at the Department of Education or places where they won't be as noticed to the general population other than to those who are affected.
Yep.
And they'll pay their debt. And the next day it'll be hailed as a big victory. We did what's right for the country. We avoided a default. We're taking some pain.
Yeah,
and
then the market rises and everybody's happy again.
Right. They haven't solved the problem. And then you'll have all the political bickering. You'll have the Democrats saying the Republicans are heartless. They cut people in this department, that department. Republicans will say you cut the military. It wasn't necessary, but at least we have a deal. That's the kind of stuff that's going to happen. But that's not a solution. That basically, if you put on your resume, your prime achievement is you didn't do your job, but it could have been worse because you could have gotten everybody in trouble. In other words, you went to Congress to pass a budget. You didn't pass it, but your achievement is you avoided the default.
Yep.
That's not an achievement.
No, it's not at all. And you know, I guess I think the same way as you. I think they're going to take it right up to the 17th, and then you know, it'll sort itself out at that point in time. But it's not.
And when is the Fed meeting? When is the Fed meeting for tapering on?
I won't say it.
It might even be right. We had predicted. We didn't know. Let's pull up the schedule. We were predicting that it might be around the same time. Let's say they did do a default. Well, then if the meeting was on the same time, obviously they wouldn't be tapering anything.
Right.
But the big date is the 17th, right, for the default. And the FOMC meeting is. Let's see if I can just pull it up here. It looks like the minutes are out on the 9th. Yeah, because that would be a month.
Yeah, the Fed minutes are out on the 9th.
Oh, well, they're going to say, especially if the government is still closed on the 9th, the uncertainty, and so they're not going to taper in October.
No. Well, we'll keep our eye on it, Louis. We're coming up on the end of our hour here. Guys, if you have any questions for Louis, where can people reach out to you for any questions they may have, and give them your blog as well?
Oh, sure. They can contact me and join me at smallgold.com, SMAULGLD, where we have a analysis every day or so on current events or general economic issues or real estate issues every week. And if you go to smallgold.com, you can check that out.
Thanks, Louis. I appreciate it. Great having you on.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. If you have any questions for me, you can go to reach out to the site, visit the site rather at reelestate360live.com, where you can catch all of our previous podcasts as well as this one will be recorded and put up on the website. Have a great weekend, guys. And if you have any questions in the meantime, you can also reach us on the 800 number 877-245-2030. Talk to you soon.